Welcome everyone to our next week of current topics in science. This week I am excited to introduce to you Dr. Oyarzabal, who is a food safety specialist with UVM Extension. And he's going to be talking to you today about food safety, and about the surveys that you guys filled out over the last couple of weeks. And hopefully you will learn a lot today. I have a feeling it'll be very relevant to everything that's going on right now. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you for the invitation. So let me share a little bit this presentation that I have in mind for today. I think everybody can see it over there.
Yep.
I'm gonna move a little bit the screen over, and you can see only one screen or two?
Just the one.
Yeah, perfect. I can see the other one. So again, thank you for the invitation. I wanted to talk a little bit about food safety because this is something that I have been doing for many years. So let me explain a little bit what we will cover, and as we go, I will tell you a little bit about how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So we will talk about food safety. We will review some of the results from the surveys that some of you filled and completed. We will discuss in a small group some of the answers to see now as a group how we think about some of these terms. We will review some of the results that we have very similar to the work that we have been doing with food manufacturers. And then we will kind of have some questions and answers. But I think we can entertain also questions as we go. Really, I'm using food safety as an excuse because the actual objective for me today is trying to push you to be a scientist. I really believe we need more science and better understanding of science and more scientists. And I'm also trying to convince you in a way to understand that public health is extremely important, as we all see now on what we are doing. Public health is based on science, it's evidence-based information that we use. And maybe also try to make you think about using maybe the scientific method for your daily decisions. I sometimes see a lot of scientists that they just use gut feelings for their decision. And I say, well, you have a great tool that you can use for basically all the decisions that you do, whether you're going to buy a car, a house, or whatever. Speaking of scientific method, I want to refresh your mind quickly and say that in the 1600s, until then, most of the people that were talking that pretended to know something were considered like, people talking about, the world, and there were two major figures in the 1600s, one coming from France, Descartes, that was using rationalism, unification. He thought by reasoning, you can explain a lot of things. And another was an English scientist, Francis Bacon, that is really more a person that used inductive methodology, the discovery. We call it the father of the scientific methods, because he thought that performing experiments will explain that. He himself didn't perform a lot of experiments, but he was collecting a lot of information to explain that, okay? And I grew up in Argentina, going to schools there. My first degree is in veterinary medicine. And I used to talk to a lot of folks that, were in different areas of science. And there was this idea of learning is earlier in our interaction, whether we were trying to be Cartesian or Baconian. Basically, we wanted to be more like people working in theory, a Cartesian, theoretical stuff, or Baconian that were experimentalists. I became a Baconian guy. I am really an experimentalist, although now I am using a lot of the Cartesian to help food manufacturers, okay? So that's the group I work with, food manufacturers. Why I ended up here is a very convoluted story, because back when I was graduating with a degree in veterinary medicine in the 80s, they said, oh yeah, veterinarians are gonna be the main group working in food safety. But they were wrong. But I was the only one that, for some reason, I stuck. I came to the States and I did some graduate school and specialized in microbiology and food safety. Actually, my first uh, lab in science has always been microbiology. So I work with people like the ones that you know, the ones that you probably have tried, that are right there close to where you do, like, you know, uh, Mike has a certification from our group in order to, you know, do what he does there, although he has also another work as a food manufacturer in St. Albans, okay? So I really help food manufacturers to stay in business. I become a resource to them. And I do a lot of work around regulatory compliance, because that can be life or death for some of these businesses, right? So within the regulatory and even the legal terms related to food safety in this country, we have three terms that I would like for you to sort of remember if you can. One means wholesome food. When we use the term wholesome food, we're talking about food that doesn't produce harm, that is safe for consumption, okay? When somebody asks me, what do you do? I say, I make sure that food manufacturers manufacture wholesome food. Anytime there is doubt about whether the food is wholesome or not, it could be adulterated or misbranded. And I'm not gonna go into the details of that, because we have been talking about these two terms since the 1930s here in this country, and it's very complex. But basically, anytime we have just, you know, a suspicion that a food is not wholesome, any inspector or even food manufacturers, they stop manufacturing, because they are probably manufacturing a food that is adulterated or misbranded, okay? So the reality is that I am not aware of any standardized definition of food safety. And many years ago, with somebody that is an editor for a food safety magazine, we started thinking about this. Are there any benefits about that? Like, can we have something that is more consistent in the way we use some terms? Could it help us communicate better? Can I, you know, help us with training and education? Can it help us focus on the most important issues at hand? Well, with that, we started doing some surveys. So that's the reason why I wanted to have a survey from your own group, from yourself. That's a survey that we were sharing around. Almost 40 of you click on the link, but then only 29 completed and submitted a survey, which is not unusual. And within them, we have several different questions. An interesting question for me is always asking people, what is your definition of food safety? So that was in the form of my definition of food safety is, and you have to fill it out, okay? So all those results, all the feedback that I got from you, I grouped them in 4 categories. And these are the categories. So most of you, I would say, close to 40% use handling preparation practices. Some of you use non-contaminant. So between the two of you, those two categories, we got at least 66, 70%, okay, of the answers. So I'm gonna ask you to do a group exercise. And really, now Emily is gonna help me to create breakout groups where you are gonna have access to this, these categories again through a Word document that is already kind of archived here in Zoom. And I will ask you to identify any challenges that you have as a group in defining food safety. I also want a spokesperson from each group because you are gonna have to summarize those findings. So you're gonna have like about 8 minutes to do the exercise. And then each group will have about 1 minute to present. The 8 minutes, I promise you, will be kind of strict. Whether you do a lot or you just talk among yourself, that's it. Now, the minute for you to present may be a little bit more flexible, and we're gonna gauge to see if you are having some interesting question that we can address now, or we may want to address later, okay? So let me stop sharing for a second. I have some questions about that I'm gonna try to address them as we go at the very end. Thank you for sharing those questions. Keep sending questions that you have. I'm gonna try to address them later. Now you can see that there is one that says 01 survey result food safety. That's the one that I want you to open once you get in your small group. And please quickly identify who may be the volunteer that will give us a little bit of, of the summary. And again, trying to find out what are the challenges of having an a standardized definition. If you come back a little bit mad because you don't have enough time, that's good. Because I'm telling you, we're not gonna come out with a definition today. That I can promise you. But maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the term concept that we use. Good? So Emily, I leave it all to you to start creating that, the breakout room, and then we're gonna be timing the 8 minutes.
Great. So just a reminder that that document is in the chat, right at the top of the chat. So that's what you want to use. And once you're in your room, we'll also give you a minute warning when your time is almost up. So I'll start making the rooms now.
Okay. So we don't have really a group assignment, number 1, number 2, number 3, but so who would like to go first? One at a time, please.
I guess I'll start. I was in breakout room 2.
Okay.
So we never received this survey that was supposed to be in the corner of the screen, but we did come up with some food safety challenges.
Okay.
And some of them were food preparation, cooking to proper temperature, where the food comes from, such as a factory or an organic farm, and what is put on the products, such as pesticides.
Okay, perfect. I like it. I like it. Who is gonna go next?
I'll go next. I'm from breakout group 3.
Yeah.
So we also did not receive that in the chat there, but we came up with a few things that we thought could extend around the board and possibly around the world in terms of food safety. Okay. So we had cleanliness and contaminants, certain allergens, certain, restaurants need to be able to accommodate people with food allergies. We realized that certain vermin would also be non-tolerated in like most restaurants, including rats and cockroaches. Cross-contamination, wearing hairnets and gloves, and also food temping and cooking practices.
Okay. So those are the challenges that people have to go through in order to try to get a food that is safe, right? Good. All right. Another group, and you don't need to tell me the group number 4 or 3. Just go ahead.
I'll go next. We kind of talked about how problems that could occur with having just a standard definition, because there could be so many ways that food can either be prepared safe or unsafe. And we kind of talked about how culturally, like here in America, food could be prepared one way, where like across the country in a completely different country, food is prepared completely differently. So it could be different tastes throughout different areas of the world and cultures and cultural norms, and that there could be like some sort of banning practices in one country that is maybe not banned in others.
Okay. I'm making some notes, perfect. Great. The next group. I'm gonna call this group, I'm gonna call first group number 1. I'm gonna be calling like that, okay? Group number 1, you know who you are. I'm gonna go for number because I want to come back later and mention something about each of the groups, especially some that are giving me some very interesting idea. Group number 3 was the last one. So let's go with group number 4.
I can go. So our group kind of talked a lot about what group number 1 and 2 talked about, making sure there's not pesticides on the fruit or food, sorry, or freshness of the food. If the food isn't quite as fresh, they might have some sort of preservative on it that could be harmful in some way. And we just like cleanliness, cooking to the correct temperature, and that sort of stuff.
Okay. All right, group number 5. How many did you have in group number 1? How many individuals, students? 6. Each group has about 6, 7?
Yep.
All right, good. So group number 5, we have like 7 groups, right? 5. Oh, so this is the last one. Okay, group number 5. Hello.
I wasn't in group 5, but we talked a little bit about the survey that you sent out and how 29 people really isn't that many people to survey, but we still came up with so many different ideas on food safety. How do you get to a standardization when so many people have different ideas on what that standardization should be?
So were you able to have access first to the chat screen and see that or not?
We didn't go through the chat screen. We went to, we got an email with the
Okay. So you got the email and you went through that and you said that it's very hard, right? You're saying it's very hard. Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to get everybody on the same page when we all think very differently.
Right. Okay, perfect. This is the last group, right, Emily?
Well, nobody actually spoke from group 5 yet. So Rachel, Ruby.
Well, we were group 5, but I spoke third.
Okay.
So I was already group 5, but I was the third person who spoke.
So the last person that spoke, Brittany, you are also for the same group?
No, I was part of group 1. Group 1, but not.
We got them all. Sorry, that was my fault. I think we got them all.
We have, okay, hard. Okay, great. Okay, so sorry again, I'm regrouping you. If you don't mind keeping that in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So basically, group number 3 here and number 5 are the ones that address the question that I have. Because the question was about the difficulties of coming with a definition. The rest, you were still talking about how you define food safety, which it has nothing to do with the question that I wanted to address. So based on those 2 groups, group number 3 and number 5, we've seen how difficult it is. Group number 3 actually brought something very useful. Yeah, we are a large country, but in comparison to the rest of the world, we are this amount, and we have a tremendous variation in cultures. I remember many years ago when I was associated with other universities, there was a group of students from my institution that went to Spain to eat and spend, like 2 weeks doing, Spanish classes. And when they were interviewing the way back, they were really disappointed because they couldn't find McDonald's. Spain, one of the mecca for food all around the world. I have been to Spain and I have eaten very well. It's amazing, right? The culture. So what we believe is ours, we tend to believe everybody should be the same or is the same, and it's way off the mark, okay? So let me show you a little bit. I'm gonna start sharing a little bit the presentation that I had before, where I can show you a little bit what we have been doing with food manufacturers, right? I told you that we are trying to do the same things. We have been, for several years, I have been trying to work with food manufacturers on understanding, you know, food safety and how they interpret that. And there is a publication that we have early this year with Barbara, who is the editor of the Food Safety magazine. I'm working more with, you know, trade magazines in this day because I reach out better to manufacturers. They don't read scientific publication like I used to do, like referee journal publication. They don't have access to it, okay? So how do they respond? Well, we received 159 responses out of a large series of emails. Of course, some were incomplete, and we analyzed 81. We received mainly about 54% of the responses from the USA. Others were many different countries, you know, including Latin America and European countries. So the survey was very interesting because we have an array of people working in the industry: state governments, academia, consultant, food service, growers, manufacturers. As you can see, the retail industry was big in answering. They are really usually very interested in surveys, okay? And most of them have a good amount of training. You know, probably you're not familiar with the hazard analysis and critical control point, or FISMA, that stands for the Food Safety Modernization Act, but these people are very sharp, because if they don't have that, they don't have a business, okay? So they got quite a bit. Even some of them are very fluent on how to work with foreign suppliers, because we got a lot of food that comes from abroad that we eat day in and day out, okay? And we have some of the old, you know, schools like the Better Process Control School that comes from the 1970s on how to stop foodborne pathogens, okay? So there are common words that also they use, but the actual definition that they gave us were all over the map. Very simple or very complex, all right? And they also use things like management, handling, practices, procedures, preparation. That was the most common way they approach it. And we know that the safety of food is improved by known practices, that when we implement them well, we are pretty sure we're going to end up with wholesome food. Remember that word, wholesome food. If I use certain practices, I can ensure wholesomeness in the food. If I don't, I have no way to prove if it is wholesome. It may be adulterated or misbranded, okay? So they also use other words. Several focus on consumer protection. They started using words that are very complex to analyze, that is risk. Okay? We have a very good definition of hazards in food safety regulation in the US, but we don't define risk. Risk is a very complex term, okay? So they are really more aware of something that can go wrong because they know they can lose their business, all right? So if we compare the result with what you wrote and what they wrote, we can see that there is some agreements on words, with the caveat that almost nobody from your group talked about management, and they talked a lot about that. because on their daily practices, they have to manage certain practices to have some kind of reassurance that that food is wholesome. All right? But they also have perception like you and I, because you and I are just regular consumers. At the end of the day, we all go and eat. And when we eat, sometimes we forget about the science behind this. So I'm gonna do, let's go to the second exercise because we have some time to do this. And since you cannot have access to the chat box, which is interesting, I want to make sure that you have access to these slides that are really, you know, where you responded. These are your own answers. Most of you found that biological hazards and chemical hazards are important. 21 out of 29. Those are the two main categories that I want you to remember. I also want you to remember that when I ask you a question, what would you do if you have doubt about food safety? 12 of you ask, I will go online and do a search, and 10 say, oh, I will ask somebody else. So you will be looking for help. So 22 out of 29 are asking for help somehow, okay? And actually the seventh one would be also included like that. I would be checking the media. Only one said, I would just eat that food. Simple answer. Very simple. Very, very much. How much is worth this? How much time do I have to do this? All right. Don't forget about simplicity in the world, okay? And then when I ask you about trusting the food that we can buy from manufacturer, it's very interesting because 14 people disagree, or 12 people disagree, 14 are on the fence. That's 25, 26 almost out of that. Only 3 people trust the food that we make. Very, very interesting. So about 30 people, only 10% of us trust what we eat, yet we eat at least twice a day. Very interesting, okay? So based on that, I want you to just focus on this. What would be the sources of information or resources that you as a group will determine may be useful? Okay, so you have 5 minutes just to tell me. Don't tell me I would just Google. I want you to tell me within Google, I found this resource. And if you want to tell me I talked to my cousin through Facebook, that's okay too. But give me more details. Don't tell me that you Google yourself out. I want to see the sorts of information that you're looking for. What are your priorities? That tells me a little bit about how you're looking for information. Does it make sense? Good, good enough. I like that. Okay, so we're gonna open up again this for the 8 minutes practice, and you guys go and then come back again. Remember, we're gonna go through the same groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we keep organized, and I would like to hear what you get out of this. All right, thank you. We can start. All right, I think everybody's here now. So let's go again through the groups as we did before. What do you think are the resources that you can use?
I'm from group 3, and 2 resources that we said was FDA and the healthvermont.gov to help discuss like what foods are important to our health. And yeah, so that's what we said.
Perfect. A federal agency, FDA, and a state agency, the Department of Health. Okay, good. Group.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm from group 5, and we kind of discussed how, like, you know, watching cooking shows or even like following like chefs on social media. A lot of them discuss like techniques that they use in cooking. Also, like books or cookbooks, or even asking those who either are in the industry or like your family.
Okay. All right. Group 3 and 5. What about the other groups?
I'm from group number 1, and my group said that the FDA, or the one that deals with the organic process, and also talking to like your local farmers, because your local farmers will know any pesticides or chemicals or any bugs that they deal with on a daily basis while their food is growing, and then once they harvest the crop is very important. So I thought they would be pretty useful, especially if they give to manufacturers often.
Good. Group number 2 or 4?
I was in group 4, and
Okay.
we talked about you can look go on the FDA and look that up if you wanted to, or you can just simply look at the nutrition label on the boxes or whatever food item it is.
Okay. Group number 2 is the only one left.
I think that's us. We were technically group 1, but we're the only group that hasn't talked.
That's fine. That's fine.
We talked about using local resources as well. I know not too long ago I had questions about canning, and I had a friend actually refer me to a website that she found from the UVM extension, using local resources as well.
Good. So a variety of resources. Some of you, at least 2 of you, focus on FDA and some state resources. Very good. Some of you go into the nutrition labels. The nutrition label will not tell you too much about whether it's safe or not. It's assumed to be safe. It's supposed to be safe. Unfortunately, the nutrition label has never been used for safety. The same is with organic food. Organic food is not safer than conventional food. It was never created to provide a safer food. The origin of organic food has been to have a more renewable use of soil, reduce chemical usage on soil. Nowadays, that's flew in different directions, but it's still the same. There is no food system created for safety. If there was one proven scientifically good, we will all be eating that. I can assure you that. All right. So basically, a variety of sources started going into some federal state agencies. Let me share a little bit now the presentation again. Okay. So basically, the state regulatory agencies are some of the first places to go. Every single state has at least 1 or 2. In some, like in New Hampshire, all goes through one, the Department of Health. In here, it goes through 2 different ones, the Agency of Ag or Department of Health. It varies. At least we got 50 places. Each state has one where we can find information. Of course, we have several agencies. These are really, really old agencies that have been doing a lot of work related to food safety. And as a matter of fact, I would like to stop sharing there so I can share some of their website so you have an idea. That's the website for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention within food safety. It's a myriad of things that you can find in there. The USDA, the Food Safety Inspection Service, that is in charge of meat, poultry, processed eggs, and siluriform fish. All of them go through the FSIS. All of the rest of the food goes through FDA. FDA has been changing the website over the last 8-10 years, making major changes. You can even see here some of the recalls going on and where it goes, what happened with them. It gives you a lot of emergency information, a lot of things. And of course, as we mentioned, here we have the Agency of Ag, Food and Market Division with the food safety. That's the areas that they cover. They are sort of representing FSIS USDA at the state level, and also the Food and Lodging Program that represents the rest, where we have, inspectors going and inspecting everything relating to food and lodging, from restaurants, gas stations that sell food, food manufacturers, everything, all right? It tells you even how to make complaints. If you think that you are getting sick because you ate in a restaurant or something, this is one of the first places to go, okay? You can say that was not clean enough. Submit a sanitation complaint, all right? So these are the resources that you have, that we have been creating for years and years about how to really improve food safety, okay? Now, let me go back to my final few slides that I'm not gonna share too much about what we are doing with the some work we did with the food manufacturer. We did in-depth interviews, an hour on the phone, talking to them, okay? A key question that we asked for them is, what do you think is the public perception of food safety and how it compares with the perception that you have, that you are a food manufacturer, you have been making food here? All of these people that we interviewed were at least within 10 to 12 years of doing food manufacturing, most of them more than that, 20, 30 years. Out of 13, they say that they don't compare. And 2 say that it compares, although there are different interpretations. And 1 say, yeah, the public health, public in general, understand what we do. But really only 1 out of 13. They were very serious about letting me know that there is a big gap between how they see food safety in order to comply and keep a business versus how we see it. And I divided those wording, as you know now, I like putting categories in words. In consumer trust, that for them is important, they assume that consumers are trusting, although most of you say that you don't trust. But they also understand that there is a simplistic view by the consumer versus the complex view that they have, because they have to comply with a lot of things that you probably don't know. And it's true, okay? They all agree there is a difference in the perception between consumers and food manufacturers. There is a serious limitation for them in trying to create a standardized definition of food safety. And the reason is that they don't want to stop the evolution of our understanding of food safety and scientific progress. At the end of the day, these people have to use facts, science, and there is a need for periodic reassessment and evaluation. They do see that important, because the way we were doing and manufacturing food 20, 30 years ago is different from now. And we don't know what's gonna happen in the near future. It's always something that all of us get surprised. We get older, but we predict less and less. And of course, they have to comply with stakeholders. There are people that want to make money out of selling food. They also had to keep not appearing in the news for the bad reason because of recalls. They had to entertain new customers that require new things. Okay? So what do I see? A large disconnect between public perception and food manufacturers. And it's putting a lot of pressure in food manufacturers. There is nothing new and nothing different from any other public health topics. Just if you think about vaccination of children and how divisive that topic is, public health, division, disconnects. Okay, we are all living that. There is a tremendous reality that we don't face. We overestimate what we think. And one of the tremendous limitation I face is quality of sources. So when people call me because they heard something in Facebook, oh, I have to explain that Facebook is not my source of information. I have to work with scientific fact. I have to work with evidence-based information. If not, I am not better off that they grabbing somebody passing by and asking the question. Okay, I'm not gonna provide better answer. And I need to provide an answer that they trust. So what can you do? Remember I told you I was talking about science. Learn science. It's not easy, but it pays back. Understand how to navigate situations of uncertainties. Science will help you that. Don't use your gut feeling. Don't just react. Use a scientific method. All right? Keep an open mind. Remember that you can use a mix of rationalizing things, thinking about it, and doing your own experimentation. You know, just the methodology of why something happened. I'm sure you will find an explanation by doing very simple methodology experimentation. And don't worry if you don't know. Actually, it's a great start. Because if you don't know and you find good resources and you're critical in the resources, you will learn a lot. We all think that we know more than what we do. Keep checking on yourself, okay? That will help you, again, navigate and have better resources for our uncertainties. We all live in uncertainties all the time, especially in these uncertain times, okay? So I kind of stopped the questions there, and we have quite a bit of questions that you guys sent, and I would like to, try to answer them if you are okay with it, unless you have some comments or anybody has something to add or say. So I'm gonna read some of the questions, and I'm gonna kind of read them and move on because I am focusing on food safety. Do you think GMO food is bad or harmful? No. What food manufacturer have you worked with? Many. I cannot just describe all of them. How do you know if a food is safe or not? Do you do a type of testing on the food? No, it's very hard to know safety. Safety is something that is very hard to prove. Once the food is manufactured, to prove safety is very tedious, time-consuming, a lot of testing, and you still have a lot of uncertainties. So the idea is that we use practices, handling practices, manufacturing procedures that we know will render this food safe. And if I have no documentation about that, I cannot prove it to anybody. So really, people that are manufacturing and handling food, they understand, most of them, not all of them, most of them understand the basic of handling and documentation, because if an inspector comes and asks, if they don't have something in writing, that activity never happened. okay? It's very hard to prove safety. In what ways do you think FDA could improve? FDA is an amazing agency. It's a tremendous history. I have had the opportunity to travel South America, Asia, Europe, and everybody always talk about FDA. Actually, most of the governments in other countries follow FDA, protocols. How can we make it better? Make them a service agency as they were, and make sure that we value career service professionals. Don't put politicians to handle that, because that's public health. Politicians are very bad for public health in general. So make them be a professional career, okay? And we are just going through a person that has been doing really bad stuff in Facebook about the agencies, and now that person has to take a leave of absence. It's a politician that didn't understand and doesn't understand how public health works in this country. We are really having serious questioning about the limitations. And when we try to limit what scientists have to tell us, we are not gonna be in good shape. That's my view. So just let them be, let them do what they do. They are experts for that. If you go out to a restaurant, how do we determine whether the food is safe or not? We have to trust. There are regulations for them to be in place. There are state regulations. Restaurants follow a state regulation, not federal regulations. And they're supposed to be, checked periodically. Should we just assume they're following safety regulation? Yes, you have to assume that whether they do it or not. It's hard to prove otherwise. How do we know these restaurants are following safety guidelines? In some states, you can't. Some states have a score system. The inspectors go, inspect the restaurants, and then they put a score, and the score appears on the entrance of the restaurant. Not every state do that. There is a long, long tradition of restaurants being in a very shady relationship with local politicians. Happens still. Because there were restaurants back in the cowboy times in the 1800s. There were already restaurants. And they were patronizing and paying to some politicians. And that has been around for about 150 years. And we haven't broken it completely in some places. That's the reality. Not in all places. But it depends on how strong the public health system is in that state. Restaurants are under state regulations. FDA only provides guidance and tries to create standards for them to evaluate, to inspect. How has food safety changed with COVID? It has changed in a good and in a bad way. It has changed in a good way because now food manufacturers and restaurants are using more, hygiene practices. They should be using those anyway, right? But now they are really serious about it. The part that is not that good is that the states and federal regulators are slowing down and saying, we're not gonna check too much. We're giving you extra room because of this crisis, which we don't know what's gonna result in the short term. Are we gonna be able to ramp it up and go back? I don't know, all right? Are there different safety regulation between the preparation of fast food and restaurant food? If so, why? Fast food and restaurant food are the same regulation, under the same regulation. The only difference is that if you are in a local place within a local community, you have a restaurant like the one I saw you, Mike, right? Right there close to you. That's serving a local population. They respond to local inspectors. If you are talking about a McDonald's, they also have a general type of requirement within the corporation. And those are really very variable, and some of them can be very tricky. Many of these large restaurants, chain restaurants, have had many problems. One was Chipotle, not many years ago, and they had to revamp all their, way of doing practices. So there is a variation. At the end, can you give us more information about your schooling and what sparked your interest in food safety? Yeah, so basically, I grew up in Argentina in a farm, and for some reason, I always did farming work. My dad has a chicken farm. We were growing chickens just to have extra money. He was a federal employee, didn't have a lot of money. So we grew up in that farm, and I became a veterinarian. For some years, I did a lot of small animals like pets, but then I got kind of, that was not my forte. And I decided to go back to production animals. And that's how I ended up in this. Of course, I didn't know that production animals would be just a little part of this. Nowadays, we have a lot of vegetables. We have a lot of, interaction with food. 95% of our, bananas that we like eating, they come from other countries. 99% of the avocados come from other countries. There are a lot of food that we don't make, we don't produce, but we like eating. So it's a very complex world. It's an extremely complex world to go for it. So I don't know if there is any extra, questions. Maybe we can kind of stop it there a little bit. What do you think, Emily?
We have time for a couple more. Just going back to see where you were.
I can address one because I have been addressing this from the very beginning. How much potential does COVID-19 have to spread through food? None. No, it's not spreading through food. It will not. We know several coronaviruses. There is one that we have known since the 1930s that affects chickens. Is the infectious bronchitis. It's a beta, coronavirus. It produces similar to what we do, we have. The vaccines are not very good. So chances are our vaccines are not going to be very good for coronavirus either. So we will just have to maneuver and work around this pandemic, but it's not transmitted through food. I just wanted to make clear that because it's very important that we understand that. And the other part was, do you think the virus will have a permanent impact on food safety regulation guidelines? No, it's not going to be permanent, but we don't know how long it's going to last and how, the states are going to come back to enforce the regulation that we have. Remember that we have a lot of regulation in this country, but the enforcement is quite variable. Enforcement requires personnel, trained personnel, resources, and sometimes we don't have that. Good. I hope I give you some ideas on how simple thing like food safety becomes very complex. And again, in my case, if it weren't by science and the things that we are improving in our knowledge, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be a resource for anybody. Nobody will call me for sure.
Thank you so much. Do you mind if any students reach out to you with additional questions that they may have?
No, not at all. If you actually type food safety and within the Vermont, you're going to see my name because UVM is what is called a land-grant university, and all my work is with food manufacturers. So probably the page that you saw that you were talking about, consumer page, that's a page that I handle in a way. So probably it's my name there. Yeah. Anytime. The food is much safer than what you think. Don't worry about it. Okay.
That's a good positive note to end on.
Yes. We may disagree in how we make the food or where it comes from, but it's safe.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and thank you for your great presentation.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.